the UK. Then through Sunday evening, those showers continue to feed in, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. Some heavy downpours likely here. And again, one of those two showers could turn to sleet and snow over any high ground, mainly above 600 to 800 metres or so. Plenty of showers across Northern Ireland, but a little bit drier across northern parts of England. Perhaps some hazy sunshine to end the day here. And across parts of Wales, central, southern parts of England, generally a dry end to the day, but one or two showers feeding in across the southwest as we head through Sunday evening. Then through Sunday night and into the start of Monday, further showers pushing in from the west. Again, these likely to turn to sleet and snow over any high ground of Scotland. But the further south and the further east you are, generally staying drier into the early hours of Monday morning. When we see those clear skies, likely to turn quite chilly, perhaps a patchy rural frost in places, but staying just a little bit milder under that cloud, particularly across the southwest. So a bit of a damp start across western areas on Monday morning, but further east, a bright but chilly start to the day. That band of showery rain continues to slowly push its way eastwards, kind of breaking up as it does so, but there still could be some heavy downpours in there. There will still be some sunshine, though, between those showers, and particularly across eastern parts of England, where it stays that little bit drier. But temperatures, again, similar to what we saw on Sunday, generally highs in the mid-teens, but generally much closer to average further north.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No, because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you know that Gladiators is the TV show most likely to get you thinking about moving, about exercising?
Well, who better to talk to us about than Gladiator and Olympian Montel Douglas. Good to see you this morning, Montel.
What way does Gladiators work in getting people to move?
I think Gladiators spans all generations, which is one of the things that I love the most. You know, we have everyone from 2-year-olds doing our moves and feeling like superhuman, all the way up to, 90s, 100, people saying that they're really inspired to start moving, to start thinking differently about their health in a range of different things, but also just to think that, why can't I do it? And everyone's got a story, everyone's journey, their strength journey is very, very different. Mine's been very different, like I said, from summer to winter into Gladiators. Even that was a massive shift. So I think it's just inspiring people to think that they can do it.
Montel, what if I just hit upon that area about can't do? I'm in a position where I can't do a lot of things now. I regard watching Country File on a Sunday night as huge exercise for me. What if you just believe you can't do anything?
I'm really sad that you said that, Eamon. You can do whatever you're... The thing is, as well, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're usually right. And I always say, try. I think many of us, the first time I climbed up of a wall doing Gladiators, I'm petrified of heights, and people know that. And you will never know that now, because I went on there and, I got frightened, I was brave, and then kept on doing it. And I think the hardest thing is to start. And what I hope is that, we're inspiring people to start something that they never thought, because you don't know until you try. And then also, it doesn't matter what it is. As long as you just make that first move, you can get better. And then you'll feel braver when you do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good
morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News Today. This morning we'll be speaking to the MP for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Melanie Onn, following that historic Saturday sitting of Parliament. With the government now considering the renationalisation of the steel industry, is this a turning point for British manufacturing and perhaps even the end of net zero? We'll also hear from the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary Andrew Griffith. What do the Tories make of what went on in the Commons yesterday? Plus, serious questions for the government this week as it appears to have watered down the promised inquiries into grooming gangs and Islamic extremism. What does that mean for justice and community cohesion? We'll be joined by Fiyaz Mughal, the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama, to discuss all of that. Shanka Singham, one of the world's leading trade experts, will join me to unpack the latest on the Trump tariffs and what they could mean for the British and indeed world economy. Is the era of globalisation finally over? And author and commentator Douglas Murray joins me to discuss his new book about October the 7th. I'll also, of course, get his take on the rape gang scandal and, indeed, the injuring of those prison officers at HMP Frankland. As ever, we've got 90 punchy minutes of politics ahead, so do stay tuned. But first, joining me now to review the Sunday front pages is the former BBC broadcaster Nicholas Owen. Nicholas, lovely to see you this morning.
Good morning.
It's all about steel on the Sunday papers. So the Sunday Express has done a double-page spread. It's on the front of most of them. I mean, the scenes yesterday were quite extraordinary. Some have said it's the first time Parliament's been recalled on a Saturday since the Falklands, but then I read in the Sunday Times they were actually recalled on a Saturday during the Afghan war. So whatever it is, it was quite historic. I mean, what's your conclusion from it all?
Well, my first thought, to be honest, at my time of life, and I go back an awful long way.
Not that long, Nicholas.
Well, it is that terrific regard and sympathy for the people of Scunthorpe and that area who've been batted backwards and forwards over the years, you know, whether their jobs be secure or not. But talk of nationalisation itself particularly, it sends the chills up my spine, frankly.
Why?
Because we've just seen, particularly Labour governments over the years, that must remember that steel has been backwards and forwards between the private ownership, public ownership, shuttlecock backwards and forwards. But there's no doubt at all that running nationalised industries, governments are just useless at running anything, frankly.
Yes, but wouldn't you rather the government than the Chinese right now?
Well, yeah, what I would rather happen is that we look for some sensible way through, we get some sensible commercial operation in to run the thing. I was a bit disturbed. There was a chap called Lord Glassman.
Yes,
he's in the House of Lords.
He comes on GB News quite often.
Yeah, he's the fella. And he was talking about sort of government ambitions in this area. And he said this, I think I've got the quote right: steel must never, ever be put in the hands of profiteers again. And he talked about foreigners as well. Agreed about foreigners. Profiteers, do we mean people who, at the end of the day, hoping to make a bit of a profit out of it as well?
And might employ more people and might expand the industry?
Well,
what I can't understand,
a big worry to me.
Nicholas, is clearly we have got a great need for steel, not just on the railways, but also because we're building theme parks in Bedford and we're trying to rearm, and obviously that requires a huge amount of steel. As to why, in the first place, we decided it was a good idea to bring our main competitors on steel into our own market.
Well, it's this whole business about dealing with the Chinese, isn't it? It's so difficult, isn't it? Very, very difficult for the government. They've got the two great powers, America and China.
I know.
Both of them turning out to be absolutely ghastly to deal with.
We're being sandwiched by the so-called G2. Let's move on to a Mail on Sunday story, though, which I think is pertinent to this whole conversation. And that's this Chinese super embassy near Tower Bridge. Now, it's now been revealed that in the planning documents, it seems to provide for 2 undisclosed underground basements and a tunnel.
Yeah, and a tunnel,
This is a planning application that has been tabled by Xi Jinping. He is at the head of the Chinese Communist Party. Apparently Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner and indeed our own Foreign Secretary David Lammy think it's a great idea to have this embassy in the middle of our capital city.
Quite extra. Well, not just in the middle of our capital, very, very close to the most sensitive area, you might suggest, apart from politics, where we are at the moment, but the financial centre, right next door to the City of London, close to the Tower of London and all the history.
In light of yesterday alone, why would you be doing this?
Very strange, isn't it? All inquiries seem to get turned away as, this is confidential, that's confidential. Most extraordinary business, I agree with you. Chinese, we talked about this just now before we came in the studio, haven't we? They're very, very good at monitoring people all over the place. They have little, what they call, I think, Chinese police stations, would you mind it? In places like Croydon and so on, where there are quite a lot of Chinese people. And now they've got this great big sort of spider's web coming in the middle. I think it's
I don't think it should be allowed.
No,
but anyway,
absolutely.
we should be asking today's guests about that.
We're against it.
Let's talk about Ed Miliband, because he's now in the firing line because of what's happened with British Steel. The argument being that net zero has caused energy costs to become so sky high, particularly for manufacturing, that it's made it almost financially unviable to keep on running British Steel. At the end of the day, Ed Miliband is pushing this net zero agenda at all costs. There's now question marks over whether he will remain in post if there's a reshuffle. Is net zero to blame for this, Nicholas?
Well, and net zero doesn't help at all, does it? Talk about Ed Miliband for a minute. Don't forget that when you do they do opinion polls among Labour Party members, I'm afraid that our dear Prime Minister and his Chancellor and so on come very far down the list. Ed Miliband, I think, is top of the poll.
Yes.
Top of the poll.
So the lefties love Ed Miliband.
Yeah. So if they're going to do... There's all this sort of whispering now that the skids might be under him and all that. Who knows about that? But I suspect that if this Prime Minister, a ruthless fellow when he has to be, we've seen that now, we're beginning to see that now, if he wants to move Miliband out of the way, which they're talking about, I suggest they get on with it straight away now.
Might be a gift to the Greens. Maybe he wants to defect.
Well, indeed, he could go there, but what Labour care about, surely, is the rise of the reform, is it not?
Yes. Well, yeah, but this is the thing. If they're going after reform voters, I would imagine that most reform voters do not agree with Ed Miliband.
No,
so this is the dilemma for Keir Starmer. The other revelation in today's papers is that as Climate Change and Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband has been spending 10 times more on foreign trips than his predecessor. What's the calculation? How many air miles has Mr Green clocked up? Because this
44,000, isn't it? So over 44,000, I think. Is the figure.
That is 12 times higher than the average Brit, including a non-scheduled flight to America. What does non-scheduled mean?
It's a private jet.
Right.
Don't you take them? You're not...
No, I haven't been partial to ever taking a private jet, I'm afraid. If anyone wants to offer me a lift on a private jet for the summer holidays, please do let me know.
Get yourself down to Biggin Hill, that's the place to go.
Well, having said that, I mean, if you're meant to be an eco-warrior, should you be taking these flights around the world? I mean, presumably, to be fair, the Energy Department might say that he's offsetting his carbon.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It makes for wonderful headlines, though, doesn't it? I mean, it's always the case you can catch people out on that sort of thing. I've some sympathy in that. If you're a government minister, you've got to get round the world, you've got to do it in the proper way and so on. I'm not talking about the private jet. That's probably going a little bit...
I know, but I always found it odd to see all of these private jets lining up for COP. Yeah. You know, let's discuss the planet while at the same time conspiring to destroy it. Shall we move on to Trump, talking about...
Yes.
Potential devastation of the planet, but at least the planet's economies.
Well, he's, the Orange Man is going, I'm really beginning to worry about this. And I don't know what GB News viewers think, and whether this man is actually crackers, you know. I mean, he's now talking about not applying the tariff to incoming computers and mobile phones.
Yes.
And this is the story, isn't it? If you want a mobile phone made in America, it'll cost you $400 or $500. If you want to make one that's made with parts from Taiwan, China, wherever it is, it's $100. Well, even Trump can see that that's absolute nonsense. So there we are. We're rowing back and rowing back and rowing back.
So he's exempted this tech. I mean, he needs to keep the tech bros happy, right? Well, it's extraordinary, by the way, that Apple makes 80% of its phones in China.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the sort of scab that is now being picked. Why have we all become so reliant on China, and why is anyone surprised that it's now coming to slap us in the face on all of these issues?
We all want cheap, haven't we? And that's been the trouble.
I know, and also Trump's tariffs going to end up with us being dumped not just with a load of Chinese steel, but Chinese everything. And what will that do for our own economy, Nicholas? It's troubling times. Speaking of which, let's just deal with this case, this extraordinary case that's gone on in HMP Frankland. So this is Hashim Abidi. He's the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. What's he done in HMP Franklin, which I believe is in Durham? Yeah,
first of all, of course, the brother blew himself up. Good, that was the only very good news of that day. Abedi's been in prison. This is the second time that he's gone on. He was in Belmarsh prison before and went on the rampage. And I don't know whether he injured people, but certainly was very aggressive. He was then put into Franklin, which is supposed to be so high security. They're supposed to put prisoners like him, Islamic extremists, in a particular section away from everybody else. Trouble is, How many of them are in prison now? That's very, very difficult.
There's a suggestion now that those isolation units are obsolete because everyone in that prison seems to be an Islamic extremist.
Access to the kitchen. And guess what's in the kitchen? Cooking oil and also presumably implements, not actual knives, I wouldn't have thought, but things that he can use as a knife. Attacked 3 prison officers. 2 of them are in a very, very serious condition. Life-threatening, they say.
Absolutely
horrific. This is an absolutely ghastly situation.
Horrific for the officers involved, and we send our love to them and their families.
We do.
And I'm going to be discussing that both with Fiyaz Mughal, who's coming on, who runs a organisation representing moderate Muslims, and indeed, of course, Douglas Murray, who will no doubt have something to say.
Yes.
Nicholas Owen, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Lovely to see you.
Pleasure.
Well, coming up next, as I say, I'm going to be speaking to Douglas Murray a little later on the show, but I'm also going to be speaking to the Labour MP for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Melanie Onn. Now, her view on this British steel situation is very interesting because, of course, she has got constituents that work in those steelworks. Stay tuned for that.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, it's an east-west split across the Mediterranean as we go through the next couple of days. Fairly settled for much of Turkey and Greece. Temperatures here climbing into the low 20s in places, but for much of Italy and southern France, actually some very unsettled weather developing. Could see some flash flooding in places. Also fairly unsettled for Spain and Portugal, although down towards the Canaries we should see some decent sunshine. For Tenerife, Wednesday, Thursday, we could see highs reaching 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. The Labour MP for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Melanie Onn, joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me, not least because, unfortunately, the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, didn't seem to have a fine time for GB News this morning, so I'm so grateful to hear from you. You said yesterday in the House of Commons that you felt that the legislation that has been passed is only a sticking plaster. Why are you saying that?
Well, I didn't quite say that. Good morning, Camilla. It's lovely to join you today. I said that it risked being a sticking plaster if we didn't think about how steel fits into the wider industrial strategy of this country. So making sure that we've got a plan for British Steel that works with all of our industries that we've got in this country already. So how does it fit in with automotive? How does it fit in with Labour's house building plans? How does it fit in with our offshore wind technologies, to make sure that we've got an order book for British Steel in this country so that we can make the best of it and that we have got an effective long-term plan for steel.
Would you rather have seen full renationalisation?
Well, I'm quite happy with the decisions that have been made around British Steel. And I don't know whether you've seen, but there were scenes yesterday in Scunthorpe after Scunthorpe had played a football match of local steelworkers and local people on the pitch celebrating the continuance of the steel industry in Scunthorpe. It means such a lot. And I think that the government taking decisive and quite extraordinary action to step in the way that it has is a huge step forward. And this isn't an exclusive situation. We've seen things like this where the government becomes a kind of provider of last resort in things like water companies and rail as well. So I think that stepping in, making sure that people have got jobs to go to next week, making sure that the raw materials continue to get through so that we see those blast furnaces continuing to burn, was the essential thing that government had to do. And I was really pleased to be in Parliament yesterday to help with that.
No, all credit to those Scunthorpe steelworkers for blocking as well some of the Chinese from coming in because they feared that it was some kind of sabotage attempt on these blast furnaces. Do we think it was a mistake to allow Jingyi in the first place? And do you think they have tried to sabotage British Steel in their own interest because they're quite happy to actually dominate our steel industry with their own inferior steel?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I mean, I think what has happened is, Jingyi took over under the last Conservative government. My understanding is there were other companies that were available, who were interested in taking on the steelworks at that time. The previous Conservative government went with Jingyi, presumably thinking that Jingyi were going to actually deliver the investment that they promised at the time. I think at the time they promised that they would commit over £1 billion worth of investment into that site. And according to local workers there, they only spent around 300 million on improvements to the site. And I think that there have been concerns that the focus has not been on the UK operation, but has been about what can Jingyi learn to utilise in China and improving production in China. And I think that has been at the crux of the issue, probably has led to some of the breakdowns in the negotiations and conversations that government have been having with Jingyi. So I wouldn't go so far as the kind of line that you're suggesting, but certainly it has been a real breakdown in relationships. The government have said that when they were negotiating with Jingyi, that they didn't feel like they were acting in good faith. And I think that that's incredibly disappointing because it completely disregards not only the individuals who work at the site, but the town of Scunthorpe itself and the wider northern Lincolnshire people too.
I know you've been involved with the Net Zero Committee. What role do you think Net Zero might have played in this? Quite a lot of reporting today, and I appreciate, of course, the war in Ukraine has pushed up energy prices. We know that. But we have got vastly more expensive energy costs than France and Germany, 4 times the cost of our energy compared to the USA. That has had an enormously detrimental impact on industrial costs for plants like British Steel in Scunthorpe. Is this an issue that needs to be addressed by the Labour government? We've obviously seen Kemi Badenoch move away from that net zero by 2050 target.
Well, I think that this just goes to the heart of a failure of government to actually invest in our own domestic energy supply. We have not had the right kind of action taken to ensure that we can produce our own energy and protect ourselves against things like unexpected events like the war in Ukraine. But there are other things that we can do to make sure that we have got support for industries. I mean, this is not just about the cost of energy. That is a big factor, and we do need to do more to bring down energy costs for those high industrial users, but making sure that we have got an order book for companies like this, because it doesn't matter, even if our energy costs are lower, if we haven't got an order book for those companies to be able to, what are they producing for, and giving them that certainty, then it will not be for anything. And there are other measures that government can take as well. So, for example, the EU introduced the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and they're doing that this year. We're not due to do that until next year. That protects against things like steel dumping. And so we could do that, we could bring that forward and make sure that we put our industries on a much more level playing field. But we have got other countries that produce their own steel, they've got their own industries. If you look at France, they've invested in things like nuclear technology, and that's why they're able, because they're not exposed to those international gas markets as much as we are, because they've invested in things like nuclear industries. And that's something that we haven't seen coming from the previous government.
On steel dumping, now we're in this new era of Donald Trump imposing tariffs. Should we be considering perhaps punitive tariffs on Chinese steel? Could that help to protect British steel?
Well, I don't think that we will be looking at tariffs. That isn't the direction that the government is going in. But when I talk about that carbon border adjustment mechanism, that is something that levels the playing field. So, it isn't a tariff as such, but it certainly is flexibility in terms of making sure that there is a level playing field when it comes to companies that want to import things that perhaps we consider to be much more essential to our own economy.
Being a MP for areas like Grimsby and Cleethorpes, clearly very close to Scunthorpe, have we done just too much deindustrialisation? Clearly, the taxpayer is going to have to shoulder the burden of supporting British steel. Are we in a position now, Melanie Onn, to reindustrialise? And are your constituents up for the challenge?
Oh, we're absolutely up for the challenge of reindustrialisation. Yes, let's see it. Let's get it going. People want to work. They want to work in good jobs that they feel a sense of pride in, that's doing something for the country. What we've seen from, the 1980s onwards was this sense that we didn't need to have this kind of manufacturing, that somehow that wasn't something that gave us a sense of pride in what Great Britain can make, that we should be looking at an intellectual economy, that we will farm all of this out to countries like China or India where production is an awful lot cheaper. But that isn't the reality of people's lives. There is a huge amount that people in areas like Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Scunthorpe have got to offer, and building the backbone of Britain through things like steelworks is where people want to be.
All right, Melanie Onn, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Great to speak to you. And as I said there, just to explain, we did ask for Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, to come on. We said this was a monumental decision yesterday to recall Parliament and have that discussion on steel. Apparently, he didn't have enough time today to speak to GB News, so make of that what you will, but I'm just going to leave that with you. Coming on to discuss steel, though, however, is the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith. He's going to join me to respond to what Melanie Onn just said. I'm also going to be speaking to Fiyaz Mughal. He's the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama. He's going to join me to talk about the government's backtracking on grooming gangs and Islamic extremism. What does that mean for British Muslim communities? And the trade expert Shanka Singham will be here to talk about what Trump's new tariffs might mean for the global economy, as well as for the UK. And, of course, we will have Douglas Murray here with us in the studio later in the show discussing his new book on October the 7th. You won't want to miss any of it, so do not even think of going anywhere.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, most of us have seen some rain over the last 24 hours or so, and as we go through the rest of today, actually, we'll probably see a little bit more. The reason for the changeable conditions is down to the fact that we're now firmly in charge by an area of low pressure, and that's going to bring in some further spells of rain as we go through the course of today. In between, we will see some sunshine, with the most frequent showers probably across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where they will potentially be heavy and possibly even thundery in a few spots. For all of us, temperatures will be down on recent days. We could still see temperatures reaching around 18 degrees in the southeast, but I think for most of us, probably feeling a little bit fresher. So as we end Sunday afternoon across Scotland, it is really going to continue to be a mix of sunshine and showers. Again, some of these showers could be on the heavy side and the odd rumble of thunder is possible. Very similar story for Northern Ireland. But as we move over towards England and Wales, I'm hopeful that these showers will start to begin to ease. So may see more in the way of sunshine as we end the afternoon. So some late sunshine to be had here. And as we go into the nighttime period, most of England and Wales turning dry and clear. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, further showers moving in, also accompanied by an increase in breeze, and the showers potentially arriving into the far west of Wales and southwest England by the end of the night. But ahead of this, under the clear skies, a chilly night could see a touch of frost in the countryside. So looking ahead to Monday, for much of eastern England into the Midlands, central southern England, actually it's going to be a fairly reasonable day, some spells of sunshine. Elsewhere, more in the way of cloud, outbreaks of rain, especially for eastern Scotland down into northwest England and Wales. Quite a disappointing afternoon to come here. But in the sunshine, further east, feeling a little bit warmer, highs here reaching 19 or 20 degrees.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Well, isn't it sending the wrong message to young workers who think that it would be all right to turn up drunk to work, or actually just ring up and say, I'm not coming in today because I'm drunk? That's no way to build a career, is it?
Well, I mean, this ensures that they don't turn up drunk to work because they can stay at home and have a line if they're feeling a bit worse for wear. But I think the point is it incentivizes people who, the reason the company did it was because they can't offer really high wages, so they have to offer any perks they can give. And this was one of them. And I think that if it makes life a bit easier, a bit more fun for young workers, then that's a good thing.
Dom, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's terrible. I've run a lot of companies. I've been in a situation where I've not had budget to hire people, and we didn't go to hangover leave. We went to offering things like gym membership, offering people things like therapy, offering positive things at work to be able to get them to enjoy where they work, not hangover leave. I think that's a bit desperate, well, very desperate. And to be honest, if you're running a company and someone wants to work at you because they want hangover leave, they're probably the wrong person to have in your organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Luca, isn't Gen Z supposed to be the generation that doesn't want to get drunk, that they're all for sort of healthy living and having mint tea instead of beer? Oh.
Well, some of us are, not all of us, don't worry. But there you go, all the more reason to do this. It can help with the nighttime economy. It can get people going back into pubs and bars and really boost that element of our economy. And as you say, many people won't want to take it anyway. It's an optional thing. It's not like you have to go out and get drunk every evening if your company has such a policy.
No, but what about having a responsible attitude to work?
The People's Channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show this morning. Still more to come today. The Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Andrew Griffith, will join me very shortly to talk about yesterday's historic sitting of Parliament. Author and commentator Douglas Murray will join me to talk about his new book on October the 7th. We've also got trade expert Shanka Singham coming up to break down what President Trump's tariffs mean for Britain's economy and the world's. And Fiyaz Mughal from Faith Matters and Tell Mama will give us his reaction to the government's watering down of the grooming gang inquiries. But first, joining me now is the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, Andrew Griffith. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for joining me as ever. Do the Tories now accept that it was a mistake to allow Jingyi to buy British steel?
Look, I think we've got to learn from what has happened, but let's be clear, at the time that was the only deal in town. It kept the steelworks going, it's protected jobs, and we did see significant investment flow into Scunthorpe and other locations. Somewhere along the line, over the last few months, there's been a fundamental breakdown of relationship with this government. I think we need to get to the bottom of that, because there were talks ongoing when we left office about investment in both Teesside and in Scunthorpe. I don't know what's happened. Was it the jobs tax? Was it the employment rights bill? Was it the ruinously high costs of energy? I don't know, Camilla. But obviously this has been a chaotic week. People have been talking about the challenge to the supply chain for Scunthorpe for many months. Some of my colleagues, Rob Waltham, the local North Lincolnshire council leader, Matt Vickers, one of the local members of Parliament. So this could have been seen coming, and we've now got this botched nationalisation where the taxpayer is on the hook, the Secretary of State is giving orders to the business, but it's still in Chinese hands. I don't think that's right for this country, and it's not right for the taxpayer.
What was the alternative? What would you rather have seen happen in the House yesterday?
I'd rather have seen a bill that was more considered, more all-encompassing. So, if you like, the bill that would bring it into public ownership rather than this botched nationalisation that leaves the taxpayer on the hook, but the business still in Chinese hands. And all of that could have been done many weeks ago. It was about 10 days when the government last brought a bill to Parliament to be debated. It's been sort of cooling its heels in that period. So why let Parliament rise for the recess and then drag everybody back for one particular day and ram it through? It's a botched nationalisation. Government have no plan for steel. They promised a plan for steel. They have no industrial strategy and they've got no export strategy. So what were they doing for 14 years? No wonder the real business secretary doesn't want to come on your programme this morning.
Well, what have you been doing for 14 years? I mean, unfortunately, British Steel is in this state because a decision was made in 2019 to hand over control of one of our key national industries to an organisation which your own Conservative colleague, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, thinks is directly linked to the Communist Party of China.
Look, the world has changed significantly in the last 5 years. That deal to sell British Steel to the Chinese was after another failed foreign owner. The business was in liquidation. There had been some successes at that time of Chinese ownership, if I looked at Lotus under the Geely Group. And it was before the Chinese reneged on the basic law in Hong Kong. So the world has changed. There's definitely things to be learned. I'm not one of those people that sit here and say any government got everything right. But let me tell you what we should be doing now,
if it looks like a communist and it speaks like a communist, it probably is a communist, isn't it?
I think that's probably right. And what we shouldn't be doing is building a supply chain now, for example, in solar energy, in wind, in electric vehicle batteries, that increases our economy's reliance on Chinese supply chains rather than on domestic supply chain and thinking about the security of this country. As I say, the world has changed. We've got to learn. The failure of this government, above all, is the failure to learn from what we've seen over the last few years.
So do you agree that part of this is the fault of net zero and setting that arbitrary target of 2050, which I appreciate Kemi Badenoch has now distanced herself from, but again, the Tories advocated that target, which has put up our energy costs exponentially, hasn't it? I appreciate the war in Ukraine is also to blame, but net zero has been an absolute disaster for the steel industry.
Look, it's absolutely right, and you can't step away from the cost of energy. Cost of energy in the UK is about twice for industrial and manufacturing purposes as in some of our European competitors, 4 times that in the United States. I was talking to automotive industry this week. They've got a challenge with energy costs, the ceramic industry. It's right, Kemi's absolutely right, that the 2050 net zero agenda, for which there were no detailed bottom-up plans, has to be changed going forward.
How about the building of this super embassy near Tower Bridge? We learned today from the Mail on Sunday that the plans include a couple of nondescript secret basements, a tunnel. The Labour government seems intent on allowing Beijing to build this monolith in the middle of the capital. What's your view on it now, not least in light of what went on in the Commons yesterday?
Well, I share the concerns of others about this, and I share the concerns that the government is failing to act in clear-eyed national interest. We saw that on the GB energy bill, where Conservatives and others put forward an amendment to prevent the use of Chinese slave labour. This government, Ed Miliband, fresh back from his visit to China, refused to support that very sensible, very reasonable amendment. And as I say, we're on a quest, unfortunately. This government is leading us in the wrong direction. It's not looking at domestic supply chains. It's making us more dependent on an uncertain world. We desperately need a growth strategy. The way you really safeguard long-term British interests, British prosperity, is to have an economy that's growing. And yet everything they're doing, from the 25 billion jobs tax that kicked in a week ago to the 300-page red tape employment bill, is reducing growth. That means we're more dependent on the rest of the world. That's no place to be.
But Ed Miliband and David Lammy are no more in Beijing's pocket than David Cameron and George Osborne back in the day, are they?
Well, as I say, look, I mean, first of all, I was happily working in business at that time, so I'm not an expert or an aficionado on what was going on in politics, but also the world has changed significantly. If you look at China's adherence to the World Trade Organization rules, what they did to the basic law in Hong Kong, snuffing out the prospect of democracy there, and simply what we've learned ourselves from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Maybe we're all sleepwalking for a period of time. The key thing is to wake up quickly and then act. The challenge is not that anyone's got the ability to travel back in time. It's that when these things teach us lessons, we're not learning them. That's my big critique of the government. It's why I think they're on the wrong course.
Shouldn't we be more protectionist in this country, maybe follow in Donald Trump's lead and slap massive tariffs on China? They're about to dump a load of their inferior steel on us. They're about to dump a load of their goods on us, I would imagine, now that they're being treated so punitively by the US president. Shouldn't we be taking China on ourselves?
Well, look, Camilla, I'm a believer in free trade. It's free trade that has driven the historic prosperity of this country. We have an enormous amount to gain from a rules-based free trade order, and we've an enormous amount to lose from the end of that. So we don't want to be naive about it. There are WTO rules about dumping. Where dumping takes place, then we should absolutely defend our interests and those that are seeking to manufacture here. But what I would like the government to be doing is to use its voice more strongly. I would have liked the government shortly after the US election to be camping out in Mar-a-Lago, our biggest single trade partner, our longest historic ally, a country that shares much of the same DNA, and trying to capitalise on that for the benefit of Britain and the wider benefit of the world. That would have been a fantastic dividend from the ability to make our own laws, make our own trade policy again. I know you've got my good friend Shanka Singham coming on later. I think he'll say very much the same. There are really good opportunities for growth. Sadly, the government squandered far too much time looking backwards, trying to reverse the referendum the British people decided, trying to cozy up naively, in my view, to Europe, with whom we already have a free trade deal in goods. And they've not made the most of the opportunity with the United States.
Final thought, again to quote your colleague IDS, he maintains that there is no free market anymore if you can have the Chinese undercutting competitors with the use of slave labour, completely ignoring intellectual property rights and, as you say, abusing the rules of the WTO. Why maintain any relationship with China at all?
Well, look, Ian talks a lot of sense and has been a lot more right than wrong and more right than many people on China. So I completely defer on that. However, we shouldn't go to the other end of the pendulum. China's the second largest economy in the world. Our architects, our financiers, our professional services rely on being able to access the biggest market. That's what drives our prosperity. And I'm sure I'm at one with Ian in thinking the way you safeguard your position in the world, the way we safeguard democracy, because that itself is a contended idea for many states around the world, is to grow your economy and be successful.
All right. Andrew Griffith, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Here's a reminder, by the way, of the candidates standing for election to be Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire: Sally Horscroft for the Green Party, Andrea Jenkins for Reform UK, Marianne Overton for Lincolnshire Independence, Lincolnshire First, Jason Stockwood for the Labour and Cooperative Party, Rob Waltham for the Conservative Party and Trevor Young for the Liberal Democrats. Coming up next, we are going to be speaking to the founder of Faith Matters and Tell, Mama Fiyaz Mughal, on the latest developments in the rape gang scandal, but we'll also be speaking to the author and commentator Douglas Murray about his new book about October the 7th. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Joining me now in the studio is the author and commentator Douglas Murray to speak about his new book on democracies and death cults. Who can see that? There we are. Top pluggage for that. Douglas, lovely to see you.
So good to be with you.
Before we speak about this book, can we talk about what has happened in HMP Frankland in Durham? We've got the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber, Hamesh Abidi, having attacked 3 prison guards. They've got life-changing injuries, cooking oil thrown at them. They've also been stabbed. We think this is the second time this has happened, but crucially, it comes 9 days after officers at that prison reported that there was no point segregating the Islamic extremists in that prison anymore because most of the prison estate is indeed of that persuasion. What's your reaction to that story?
Well, obviously, it's a failing in the prison system, failing of security, obviously, the poor officers who've been attacked, evidence of that. I think that there's always in these things a tendency to look at the first bit of the problem and not at the wider problem. The wider problem includes not just why there are so many people in prison, that jihadists and set up gangs, effectively, in our prisons, but also this question of that I've asked since the Manchester Arena bomber was identified. Why were the Abedi family in Britain to begin with? We still don't know the answer to that. 8 years on, we just don't know the answer. Abedi's father seems to have fallen out with Colonel Gaddafi because they were from rival jihadist groups. So why is Britain the place where people who fall out with other jihadists come to continue their lives?
Also, why is the taxpayer paying for Abedi to be in prison if he's attacking officers, not just here, but also at Belmarsh, we believe?
Why are any of the family here in the first place? There has been no inquiry, so far as I know, no minister or Home Office official held accountable for this. And until we start holding people accountable for the decisions they make that are so terrible, nothing will change.
You might be familiar with Amjad Tatar. He came on the show some months ago. He's a Emirati sort of counter-Islamic extremism expert. And he made the point that he thinks there are more extremists in Britain than there are in the Middle East. I mean, it was quite the claim. He's making the point that, for instance, it is illegal in countries like Egypt and indeed the UAE to wave Hamas and Hezbollah flags. And he couldn't believe it that he came to London and saw them on the streets of the capital. Equally, he is wondering why on earth we haven't prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood. That's an organisation that is banned in Syria. What's your view on the current state of play with Islamic extremism in Great Britain?
It's the same it's been for years, and no one has changed it, Conservative or Labour. No one's going to change it. It's just too big a problem for them. They're much too frit to know what to do about it. You're completely right. I've spoken to many people in the UAE who have the same view as your guest. First of all, by the way, it's also illegal to fly the flags of prescribed terrorist organisations like Hamas and Hezbollah in the UK. The 2006 Anti-Terrorism Act made that illegal, the glorification of terror. But as you and your viewers know, it's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them and whether the CPS actually prosecutes for it. I have many friends from across the Middle East and elsewhere who are horrified by what is happening in our country. They are on top of much of this to differing degrees across that region. But here in the UK, they come and they just say, what are you allowing? One reason why we do allow it is because even after all of these years, we still don't understand it or want to confront it. I say we, I really mean government, politicians, Westminster.
Well, that also plays into my next question about this watering down of these local inquiries into the grooming gangs. Now, Trevor Phillips, the former head of the Equality Commission, had suggested that was because Labour doesn't want to, quote, offend Pakistanis. Yes. Do you concur with that view? Why do you think, A, we haven't got a national inquiry, and B, what inquiries we are having seem to have been watered down?
I'm not a fan of inquiries into this, I'll be frank. I think it's a distraction. I think it's lamentable that Angela Rayner and the Labour government have seen fit to not even have inquiries into this. But as I've said sometime in the last months, we've had plenty of inquiries into the rape gangs. We've had plenty. Where do they go? What happens? Who acts on them? Why are there no more prosecutions? Why is there not a speed up in the number of prosecutions? The number of victims versus the number of people prosecuted in the last 2 decades does not stack up. And when I hear people saying, oh, this is going to upset the Pakistani community and so on, I say, first of all, why would they be upset? If members of my community were found to be gang-raping girls based on their race, I would want to know about it, and I'd want those people to be prosecuted. I'd be very shameful about it, but I would want those people to go to prison. So why is it upsetting to Pakistani communities in the UK? And why, after all of these years, do we have people saying, oh, it's racist or Islamophobic or much more to even mention this? Sorry, it is too late in the day to play those games, and we should be utterly, utterly intolerant of anyone at this stage in 2025 knowing what we know about these mass crimes, claiming that the best thing you can do with it is to have yet another inquiry, which will be shelved by yet another government and nothing happening. It's time that we actually did things in this country instead of just doing inquiries into them.
We learned this morning that the Rotherham gang got 600 grand in legal aid to defend their case.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, those are one of the relatively few gangs that actually, not enough people were prosecuted, but one of the very few ones where that was actually prosecutions. Some of the members of that gang, they also made sure that they gave up their Pakistani passports because the state acts so slowly here, and then they're only on a British passport, and then you can't deport them. The whole thing is lamentable, and until a government gets this in its grip and deals with it, we should keep shouting from the rooftops about this.
I should point out, actually, that was a GB News exclusive, the 600 grand on legal aid. And as you'll know, Charlie Peters, my GB News colleague, has done a lot of work on this.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the book. Why did you decide to write it?
2 reasons. The atrocities of October the 7th, 2023 are a type of atrocity that we have seen elsewhere in the West, in the Manchester Arena bombing, the Ariana Grande bombing, the Bataclan massacre in Paris, the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando, Florida. But this was on a scale far, far beyond them even. This was 1,200 people massacred in a morning, including at a dance party in the south of Israel, by jihadists, Hamas, who committed crimes so appalling I can't describe some of them on air. They also kidnapped 250 Israelis from their homes. I noticed very early in this that 2 things would happen. One was there was a great risk that the actual crimes, the atrocities, were not going to be documented enough. The world was going to pass over them and talk about Israel's military response to get back the hostages and to kill the leadership of Hamas. I wanted to go, and I did go straight away, to speak to the survivors, the families, the wounded, people in the hospitals, and much more, and tried to make sure that I had as good a sense of the day as it's possible to get. Second thing was that I was embedded with the IDF in Gaza and Lebanon and Israel and elsewhere to make sure that I saw firsthand, and I recount in the book, how the IDF responded to this atrocity. But the third thing, which was on my mind from October the 8th, was what has gone wrong in the rest of the West? What has gone wrong in the UK? That, as we know, the Telegraph splashed the story a few weeks ago. On the day of October the 7th, so-called pro-Palestinian groups, who are actually just anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, organised demonstrations for that night and the night after. In what other world are 1,200 people burned alive in their homes, raped and beheaded, and people in our society immediately decide to victimise the victims?
Yes.
And this is the question I ask in the book, among other things, is what has gone wrong here that we have, from days after October the 7th, hundreds of thousands of people on our streets celebrating the death cult of Hamas, not siding with a democracy like Israel, an ally of ours that makes mistakes like all allies do, but not siding with our allies, but siding with the death cult. This is an enormous civilizational challenge to us in Britain, in America, in the rest of the West. And until we grasp the obscenity of what has happened on our streets in the last 18 months, what has been happening in our mosques, in our streets, we will not address this problem, and the problem that Israel has stared in the face of will happen here as well.
Well, what is to blame for this figure? A poll last year of British Muslims taken by the Henry Jackson Society found that only 25% believed that rapes or murders had actually taken place on October the 7th.
It's an utter obscenity, and it points to how many sick people there are in our society. We have had, in the last 10 years, a slogan in the wake of Me Too and so on, believe all women. But it turns out that the rule doesn't apply if the women are Jews, if the women are Israelis. I have seen the evidence of this. I have spoken to the people who have gone through this. The victims of rapes on the 7th and people who saw the dead bodies of women who've been raped. The idea that we have such a sick coterie in our country that does not believe raped women because the people who carried out the attacks are Hamas or the people who suffered them are Israelis is, again, a problem in our society here. If this happened with any other group of people, if there were thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in the UK who did not believe it when I don't know, let's play it another way around. If a Muslim woman in the UK said she'd been raped by white men, Jess Phillips and everybody else would be all over that. We would know the name of the one case where that had happened, especially if it was for racial and religious reasons. But Jess Phillips and co, they don't care if, first of all, the victims don't suit their victim hierarchy, and secondly, if the perpetrators aren't comfortable for them.
So there may be sinister motivations behind people not believing that women, Israeli women, were raped and tortured before they were murdered on October the 7th. It could be born out of ignorance. It could be because pro-Palestinianism has become a popular cause in our university campuses. It could be a kind of following of a herd mentality.
Or all of the above.
Yeah.
And people, of course, don't forget, I mean, a lot of people need to be taught into hatred. You have to be taught into it. We have to ask ourselves, why is this being taught? Why is pro-extremist ideology being pushed in this country? Why are we so far behind tackling it still? It goes back to my point. Look at the number of reports and inquiries. Every time an atrocity happens in the UK, we have another darn report, another inquiry.
Lessons will be learned.
And the lessons never are learned. Unless we grapple with this in Britain today, we will see what Israel suffered again here in the UK.
But isn't propaganda also part of the explanation? You probably have to accept, as I do too, that Israel has lost the war on social media when it comes to informing the public about what's happened. How much of the data out of Gaza do you think is trustworthy? Because it's very difficult. I know you've been very close, but you can't get British journalists in there to verify much.
Well, I've been in there plenty, and other journalists have been, actually. I've been in Gaza with other British journalists.
OK, so it is possible to get better data than that supplied by the Palestinian health authorities?
That's tricky because, of course, Hamas still runs Gaza. And the BBC and others run the Hamas health ministry figures as if they're legitimate. Undoubtedly, there have been civilian casualties in Gaza. Undoubtedly, Hamas has talked them up. But equally undoubtedly, Hamas started the war. Hamas is losing the war. That means that Hamas fighters are being killed at a very high rate. The Hezbollah and Hamas leadership has been decimated in the last 18 months. But fourthly, yes, because of the nature of which the death cult of Hamas operates, they deliberately, and this cannot be said often enough, they deliberately flout every law of war and make sure that every law of war that the IDF uses is used against them. It is not meant to be permitted to dress as a civilian whilst being a fighter. to hide in civilian houses, to fire RPGs from mosques, to shoot from hospitals, to hold hostages in basements of hospitals, to use civilian houses as torture chambers. There was one guy, I mention him in the book, among the 4 so-called Al Jazeera journalists who were killed, who Al Jazeera said, oh, these are just innocent journalists. One of the journalists in question was shown when the IDF collected laptops in Gaza to be one of the heads of Hamas's rocket department. So, oh, innocent journalists, but just built rockets in the evening, as I'm sure you and I do, Camilla. We'll leave this studio and go straight back to RPG assemblement.
Yes, indeed.
And the second one on that quickly was that one of the people who contributed to Al Jazeera and other media during this war wrote all these pieces about how terrible it was for the citizens of Gaza to suffer the IDF's retaliation for the 7th. Forgot to mention to his readers that he was holding Israeli hostages in the basement of his house where he was torturing them every day.
Although the IDF have made mistakes themselves.
For
We've
sure.
had that aid convoy, 15 aid workers, we believe, killed recently.
Well, that's still being disputed, but I don't doubt that there will be innocent people who have been killed. And the reason for that is that Hamas travels in ambulances, in aid convoys. It uses every single thing it can. And until people realise that one of the things about the death cult mindset is the society we are from wants to minimise civilian casualties. Hamas thrives on civilian casualties. We love life, they love death. And the literal taunt of Hamas, Hezbollah and the others is that the Westerners, the liberal, democratic Western mindset believes in life, and they believe that's something they can use against us. I say it's one of our virtues.
Douglas Murray, thank you very much indeed. Your book on democracies and death cults is out now. If you want to read more about this, thank you very much indeed. Coming up next, we're going to be speaking to Shanka Singham about Trump's tariffs and be speaking to Fiyaz Mughal, who is going to give us a moderate Muslim view on what I've just been discussing with Douglas Murray. Don't go anywhere.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
If you've read Spare, you'll know that Prince Harry's very open, isn't he, about his drug taking in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see if he was honest in his visa application.
Well, we're absolutely waiting for it. Yes, he admitted he took cannabis, cocaine and magic mushrooms, as we know in Spare, and also the Netflix series. He said that. There's been so much talk about it, and obviously Judge Carl Nichols originally said he refused to release any footage, saying that basically because of Prince Harry's privacy. But as we know, Trump, border security and application of rule is one of his priorities. And I do see Harry as a pawn, really, for Trump and collateral. So everyone's waiting to see what happens. Tuesday is the day, D-Day. We don't know whether Prince Harry is quaking in his boots. But, he quit being a working royal. Well, did he get preferential treatment? We don't know. There is possible misconduct. Apparently, DHS says that actually releasing the paperwork won't shed any light onto how things work. But there are thoughts as well that he could have entered on a special visa. Now, this is an A1 visa that deals with immigration paperwork. And it's a special kind of visa for heads of states and royal people. So Prince Harry could have got through on that, but we're waiting to hear. It's D-Day tomorrow.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Trump's tariffs now with the CEO of Competir and former advisor to the UK Trade Secretary and to the US Trade Representative, Shanka Singham. Shanka, lovely to have you on the show this morning. Thank you for your time on a Sunday. Why hasn't the economy sort of fought back a little bit more since Trump put that 90-day pause on last week? We've still got the stock market looking pretty shaky.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I don't think Trump is particularly concerned about the stock market. I think he is concerned about the Treasury market and the 10-year Treasury yield, which is rising. You know, it's not rising massively, but it is rising. I think the pause was caused not only by the what's happening in the markets, but also because if you look, you know, contextually at this, what's happened is he's put a tariff on. If you remember, he waived this book at the time. The book was the National Trade Estimate. This is the book he waived from the presidential podium and said it made for very sad reading. And in many ways it does, because the barriers that he's talked about that other countries impose on US companies have not changed over the last 30 years. In fact, if anything, they've increased. So what's happened here is that he's basically said, look, if you want to lower these tariffs, then look at this book, look at these entries. If you're China, look at the 45 pages of barriers that are listed here. If you're the European Union, look at the 33 pages of barriers that you have here, that we've argued with you. We've tried to get you to change for the last 30 years and you haven't. That's our opening bid. If you come to the table, we'll start talking. And I think 70 countries have come to the table. And I think what some of those countries probably said, particularly Japan and Korea, is, look, we've got a very big tariff here that's about to apply. We genuinely are at the table this time. You know, you might argue 30 years too late, but we are at the table. Please take the tariff take the gun off the table so that we can negotiate. Interestingly, these negotiations will take some time. As you get closer to that 90-day period, I think you're going to find those countries will feel extra pressure to negotiate. So Donald Trump is very good at doing deals. He understands how to use time, and time will work in his advantage as you get closer and closer to that time when the tariff pause is lifted and the tariffs go back into place.
So really, that 90-day pause is a deadline for a deal rather than us facing the prospect of them being retabled.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen here is he's essentially got countries to come to the table. I think with regard to the UK, and one of the concerns I would have for the UK is, you know, Scott Bessent, who's leading this, is not, you know, he's not talking about the UK. He's talking about Japan. He's talking about Korea. He's talking about India. He's talking about these other countries. So I would be, if I was the UK, making sure that I was looking at my entry and I was not doing anything that damaged the negotiations, such as, for example, dynamically aligning to European regulation, or as Spain is doing, courting the Chinese. That would not be a good idea. And I think what will happen is signals from the White House, one hopes, will get clearer. I think part of the reason the bond market is reacting the way it is because signals from the White House have not been very clear. Scott Bessent, who appears to be leading this now, with Jameson Greer, the USTR, as advising on the barriers. His signals are actually quite clear. I think the president's signals are quite clear. Some of the other advisors have not been very clear. They've talked about, we're not going to negotiate these tariffs. Clearly, the administration is negotiating these tariffs, including the 10% minimum tariff that every country now faces. The president has said that tariff can go as well in the negotiation.
Whether we're at the front or the back of the queue for a trade deal, Shanka, this talk that we've heard from former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and others about us trying to turn ourselves into Singapore-on-Sea, I mean, how credible is that? Is that what we should be doing? I knew you were an advocate for this kind of approach when we were all campaigning for Leave and Remain back in the day.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting thing here is that most of the barriers that the US administration is concerned about are regulatory barriers. They're not, I mean, I think tariffs gets all the media attention, but actually, if you look at these entries, most of those 33 pages in the case of the EU, it's all regulatory barriers. It's particularly in the case of the EU, regulatory barriers in the area of agricultural trade. So unless you're prepared to change those, unless you're prepared to improve those, you're not going to get a deal. But the good thing, the win-win here is that improving your own regulatory system, making it more pro-competitive, is good for your own economy anyway. So it's the kind of thing you should be doing, and arguably, one would say with the UK, we could have been doing for the last several years, is to actually remove a lot of these restraints and regulatory barriers that the US has been complaining of. It's going to benefit our own economy, first of all, and certainly it will help the relationship with the US as well. So maybe this is the extra, drive, the incentive that we need. And what the president is also saying is he's prepared to do in the US what he's asking every other country to do. There was an executive order on April the 9th, which essentially said to all department agency heads, I want to eliminate all anti-competitive regulations in the US. So, there are lots of anti-competitive regulations in the US, just as there are around the world, and he's prepared to remove those in the US. And I think if we can do those things and communicate to the US that we're willing to improve our regulatory system, it will not only benefit our own economy, it will also help those US exporters who have been complaining about these things for some time. And that is, I think, a win-win landing zone for a deal, between the US and the UK.
We've just seen Donald Trump carve out smartphones to make sure that the cost of those are kept down for the US consumer base. How should we be dealing with a problem like China, Shanka?
Well, I think not as we have so far been dealing with it, and that goes back several decades. I think we have to recognize that the Chinese economy is built on a series of state-owned enterprises, distortions, state-led capitalism that is not compatible with our version of competition-based market economy. And we should be prepared with the US and with others, with the Japanese, with the Australians, with others, to have a robust defense mechanism when we identify those kinds of distortions and their impacts in China. I mean, we're talking now in the UK about, British Steel. Well, the reason we have a real problem in the steel sector in the UK is because we allowed China distortions in the steel sector to run rampant all over the world. It massively increased steel oversupply. We damaged our own industry by making energy costs about 4 times what they are in other countries, and energy is about half the cost of production of steel. But the big problem with steel were the Chinese distortions about which we did nothing. So I think we have to join the US and the Australians and the Japanese and other countries in having a robust approach to and it doesn't mean you decouple from the Chinese economy. It doesn't mean you close down to trade. What it does mean is you send a signal to China that if you're willing to play by the rules, if you're willing to have a competitive market, then we welcome your imports. But if you're going to distort in this fashion, we're going to have a robust defense mechanism against you.
Shanka Singham, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Well, coming up, we're going to be speaking to the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama, Fiyaz Mughal. He's going to discuss the latest developments this week in the rape gang scandal and also talk about what's been going on in HMP Franklin Prison. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Hello there, it's an east-west split across the Mediterranean as we go through the next couple of days. Fairly settled for much of Turkey and Greece. Temperatures here
climbing into the low 20s in places. But for much of Italy and southern France, actually some very unsettled weather developing. Could see some flash flooding in places. Also fairly unsettled for Spain and Portugal. Although down towards the Canaries, we should see some decent sunshine. For Tenerife, Wednesday, Thursday, we could see highs reaching 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Quite a bright start out there for many of us this morning, but the changeable conditions are very much on the way for all of us as we head through this week. Some showers are affecting western areas through the rest of this morning, but generally the further east you are, it will be staying a little bit drier. Plenty of sunny spells to start the day. Northern Ireland, much of Scotland as well, seeing some sunshine, but those blustery showers still feeding in across the northwest as we go through Sunday afternoon. Temperatures today will be a notch down compared to what we've seen on recent days. Highs in the south of 15, 16, 17, perhaps 18 degrees, but generally those temperatures much closer to average as we head to the north of the UK. Then through Sunday evening, those showers continue to feed in, particularly across parts of Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland. Some heavy downpours likely here, and again, one of those two showers could turn to sleet and snow over any high ground, mainly above 600 to 800 metres or so. Plenty of showers across Northern Ireland, but a little bit drier across northern parts of England, perhaps some hazy sunshine to end the day here. And across parts of Wales, central, southern parts of England, generally a dry end to the day, but one or two showers feeding in across the southwest as we head through Sunday evening. Then through Sunday night and into the start of Monday, further showers pushing in from the west. Again, these likely to turn to sleet and snow over any high ground of Scotland. But the further south and the further east you are, generally staying drier into the early hours of Monday morning. When we see those clear skies, likely to turn quite chilly, perhaps a patchy rural frost in places, but staying just a little bit milder under that cloud, particularly across the southwest. So a bit of a damp start across western areas on Monday morning, but further east, a bright but chilly start to the day. That band of showery rain continues to slowly push its way eastwards, kind of breaking up as it does so, but there still could be some heavy downpours in there. There will still be some sunshine though between those showers, and particularly across eastern parts of England where it stays that little bit drier. But temperatures again, similar to what we saw on Sunday, generally highs in the mid-teens, but generally much closer to average further north.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Joining me now is the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama, Fiyaz Mughal. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Look, I've just been discussing a lot of these issues with Douglas Murray. We've had this awful situation in HMP Franklin Prison where prison officers have been attacked by the brother of the Manchester Arena bomber. Huge concerns about Islamic extremism in prisons in general. You're a moderate Muslim. You've been campaigning on these issues for decades. What's your overview of the situation with regards to Islamic extremism in Great Britain today?
Well, the situation is that we have had Islamist extremism affecting our country for nearly 35 years now. October the 7th has unfortunately supercharged Islamist extremism. So we go through these periods where it waxes and it wanes. But October the 7th has created a more difficult, a more complex, and I suspect a scenario which unfortunately creates more minds drawn towards Islamist extremism. So we're in a very fragile, and I would suggest a difficult period ahead.
Who do you think are the people that are sort of stoking up this extremist sentiment among some members of the Muslim community? It's been suggestions that it might be imams preaching in mosques. It may even be the ongoing role of the Muslim Brotherhood in the UK. What's your view?
Well, we know that the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, ideologically influenced the setup of some organizations in the 1980s. We also know that some of the children of the Muslim Brotherhood, i.e. people affiliated with them, have now gone on to other organizations within the sector, within the charitable sector. But certainly post-October the 7th, there have been discussions and sermons given in some mosques in the United Kingdom, which are deeply troubling. And I speak as a Muslim who wants to see non-violence preached rather than any form of violence. And the reality is, post-October the 7th, some of the language which has been couched as religious discourse actually gives the impression that violence may be okay when it's couched in religious discourse. So I know evidentially that some of the discourse within some mosques has been really problematic. I know some of the discourse around this deep sense of victimization that the West is against us. All of that discourse still continues in some sections of parts of the community. And actually, we're not having people who are more open-minded, receptive, willing to engage, willing to listen to even very different discourse leading a lot of organizations. And so there is still a disconnection, and there is this sense of distance between some parts of the community and the wider sense of other communities, but also the sense of integration is breaking down post-October the 7th.
Is this a genie that we can put back in the bottle? I mean, we've got the Labour government now flirting with a new definition for Islamophobia, which I know you have a view on. We've also got the suggestion that they're watering down the grooming gang inquiries because, as Trevor Phillips has alleged, they're afraid of offending Pakistanis.
You see, I think there is something about Labour playing to a base here. We can't get away from the fact that actually the losses that Labour suffered in the election in areas with some significant Muslim majority populations has stung them. And so there is an element of that happening. And I think the Islamophobia definition is one small step in that direction. And I don't, as you said very clearly, I don't see why we need a definition when the laws are distinctly clear. There are more than enough laws in our country for a range of things, including prosecuting anti-Muslim hatred. There are more than enough laws, and many people are prosecuted for targeting Muslims because they are Muslims. By creating a definition on Islamophobia, first of all, Islamophobia is such a wide term, which gives the impression to people you can't question religion. That's the initial impression it gives. The fact of the matter is we don't need definitions, we need the enforcement of current laws. The second thing is, the reality is that successive governments have never produced a quality and a significant integration policy that can be implemented. We've never had that for over a decade plus. But we need to take a muscular approach to integration. We need to defend our core values of what our country stands for. We should be proud of the values around women's rights, around issues of openness, around free speech, around the defense of democracy. These are fundamental values that make up our country. But we are letting those values be corroded. Sorry. Yes.
And yet, no, I was going to say, because I wrote a column about this in the Telegraph on Saturday, and yet we have feminists, in inverted commas, not calling out the subjugation of Muslim women in some Muslim communities. We've got Muslim women overrepresented when it comes to inactivity statistics. More than half don't work. We've got women from Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities not even speaking English. Briefly, Fiyaz, how do we address those issues?
Well, we address those issues because, as you said, we need different parts of our communities, feminists in our society, to start standing up for people, for many Muslim women who are really, in many instances, pushed down because of the views of, I would say, misogynistic men in society. We need to be able to challenge some of those values. We need to actually take a much more muscular approach to challenging them and not being accepting of such toxic values. And so I think we need to take a much more muscular approach. We need to take a much more forthright approach, and we need to have a proper enforced integration strategy that goes through schools, through ethnic colleges, through universities, that says these are our core fundamental values and we will defend them and we will challenge other difficult, discriminatory, and I would say divisive views in our society.
All right, Fiyaz, we have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Coming up next on GB News is Sunday with Michael Portillo. And Michael, I think the Pope has appeared in St Peter's Square for Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday indeed. Very good to see His Holiness there. And if he'll forgive me, I'm just going to talk over these pictures to tell you that in my programme, beginning at 11 o'clock, I'll be asking whether net zero policies make sense as we are importing coking coal from Japan. I'll have Sir David Dearlove, who's a former head of MI6, on the programme, and I'll be asking him really whether Putin can win or lose the war in Ukraine. A new podcast looks at the Holocaust through personal artefacts, a wedding dress made from parachute material. How poignant is that? And I'll be slurping some fresh spring wines, including fizz from Greece. All of that at 11 o'clock.
Sounds delicious, Michael. Why do I never get to slurp wine? I'm actually working next week for Easter Sunday, so maybe we'll have a little bit of a tot then. I'm going to be back same time next week then, 9:30. But do please stay tuned for Michael Portillo, who's up next, and enjoy the rest of what will hopefully be a sunny Sunday.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, most of us have seen some rain over the last 24 hours or so, and as we go through the rest of today, actually, we'll probably see a little bit more. The reason for the changeable conditions is down to the fact that we're now firmly in charge by an area of low pressure, and that's going to bring in some further spells of rain as we go through the course of today. In between, we will see some sunshine, with the most frequent showers probably across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where they will potentially be heavy and possibly even thundery in a few spots. For all of us, temperatures will be down on recent days. We could still see temperatures reaching around 18 degrees in the southeast, but I think for most of us, probably feeling a little bit fresher. So as we end Sunday afternoon across Scotland, it is really going to continue to be a mix of sunshine and showers. Again, some of these showers could be on the heavy side and the odd rumble of thunder is possible. Very similar story for Northern Ireland. But as we move over towards England and Wales, I'm hopeful that these showers will start to begin to ease. So may see more in the way of sunshine as we end the afternoon. So some late sunshine to be had here. And as we go into the nighttime period, most of England and Wales turning dry and clear. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, further showers moving in, also accompanied by an increase in breeze, and the showers potentially arriving into the far west of Wales and southwest England by the end of the night. But ahead of this, under the clear skies, a chilly night could see a touch of frost in the countryside. So looking ahead to Monday, for much of eastern England into the Midlands, central southern England, actually it's going to be a fairly reasonable day, some spells of sunshine. Elsewhere, more in the way of cloud, outbreaks of rain, especially for eastern Scotland, down into northwest England and Wales. Quite a disappointing afternoon to come here. But in the sunshine, further east, feeling a little bit warmer, highs here